There we go. All right, perfect. Well, welcome everybody. I would like to personally thank you for joining me for this brand new event. It was birthed in my brain and I just put it to paper and got it going. I entitled this event Interstate 1804, the Out of State Alumni Panel. I really got a desire to do this event when I thought about the percentage of our students that stay in state. And as I'm doing career coaching and I'm talking to students about potential job opportunities and hearing them, always tell me, well, I want to stay in state, I'm realizing that some of your majors will probably require you to go out of state. So I think it can be scary. I'm not an Ohioan, I'm a Michigander. And I shot up out of Michigan the first chance I got, right? I was ready to go. If you would have told me after middle school I could have left, I would have left. And it speaks nothing bad about my environment. I just always wanted to get outside of my home state. So being that I was one that was courageous to do it, I think it's also really good to hear from people that are from your school, from your state, that have taken the plunge and landed in some really great jobs, if I must say so myself. So this is where this idea came from. If it goes well, we'll keep this going and you all will get a chance to interact with different alumni from different states and different backgrounds, hopefully within your fields of study or maybe in the state that maybe you want to live in, because some of you all are in states that I consider and probably still considering when I grow up a little bit more. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce our panelists. I will let them, ooh, there we go, technology. I will let them introduce themselves as they get started. But since we have four beautiful people, we will try to get them all the opportunity to speak. So I'm going to do a brief introduction. So first, we have Miranda. Is it Cisnick? Did I say that right?
No, it's zinc. It's just literally like
Zinc.
the S is silent. It's zinc, like the element.
There we go. I literally had the periodic table in my head as soon as you said that. So Miranda Zink, she works for Teach for America. That's really cool. If you don't know what Teach for America is, it's a really great program. I think of it as a special gap year program. So if you're not ready to be an adult, no fret. You can do a program like Teach for America. And if you wanted to always be a teacher, but you did not get your teacher's education degree from Ohio University, you got a second chance at life. So she was able to do Teach for America and land in Houston, Texas, but now she's back in Columbus, so we get to work together now. She was the first person that I invited to do this. And then we have Jennifer Moore, who is actually a star amongst us. She is an Emmy-winning executive producer at KHOU 11 News. So she's on the news station, y'all. She's a big deal. So if you know somebody in Houston, tell them to tune in or FaceTime you when she's on the air, because she's a great
Well,
she's a
I'm
great
behind the
person.
scenes, but shameless plug. Watch KHOU when you're in Houston.
There you go. There you go. Oh, then she really has some power. And then she's behind the scenes telling them what to do. So definitely, she's a threat. And then we have Sydney Work. I love that her last name is Work because I believe she probably puts in a lot of work for her job. But she's like me. She's a career coach for Flex Jobs. And she is in Wilmington, North Carolina. And North Carolina is still on my list of things to do. And then last but certainly not least, we have the star himself, Matt Hauser. We met in my first role. He did a career fair. I mean, excuse me, a high school fair with me for students that are trying to enroll into college. He came and hung out with me in Tennessee, and he is the executive producer of music and head of production at, is it Talalight TV?
Tail light. Yep.
Light TV, and then he is also the president of the Nashville Alumni Association. So Tennessee has a very huge and prominent Bobcat chapter down there, alumni chapter, and he's the man in charge. So if you go down to Tennessee, you definitely want to connect with Matt. So with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and jump into our first question. And then you all can feel free to add any more details. If I didn't do a great job of introducing you all, feel free to add details to that. But with that being said, our first question is, as a rising senior in undergrad, what was your postgraduate plan? So anybody can start, feel free.
I'll kick us off. So I had did an internship for Taillight actually while I was a junior. Coming out of OU, I had a lot of friends who were in television or film and went to LA or New York for their internships, but I chose Nashville wanted to be different, and had a great experience and loved the city, fell in love with the town, and the company I interned for was a great company. And so my plan was come on back down, go to Nashville, see what you can stir up. I didn't have a job when I left college. It was just, I knew the town was where I wanted to land. And my plan was network as hard as I could while I interned, make as many friends and colleagues as I could. And the minute I was back, just re-engage every single one of those folks and just say, hey, remember me? I was a little goofball kid who was here last summer, and hopefully you give me another chance to come be a part of your projects. And if an opportunity presented itself, I just made myself readily available.
I know for me, when I was a senior, I had to realize what exactly I wanted to do. Most journalists, when they come to OU, they want to be the next Barbara Walters, the next Oprah Winfrey. And it hit me that I'm like, you know what? I don't want to work in Timbuktu making no money, which is okay because you rise really quickly when you do that. I wanted to write and have more control of the show. So I said I wanted to be a producer. And I had been interning with WCPO. Anyone who's familiar with Cincinnati, it's a Scripps station, Scripps School of Journalism, nice family. And I had interned there every summer leading up to my graduation. And so it worked out that, like, hey, they know me, they don't really have to train me. And I was hoping that they would have a job for me. There was nothing guaranteed. And in fact, when I did graduate, they did not have an opening. And so I did the McNair Scholars Program at OU during that time period, which prepares you for grad school. And then by September, with the budgeting and everything with news stations, they had an opening, and I was able to get hired. And in Cincinnati, that's a big market to start working in, especially at that time, right out of college. There was no way I was going to be reporting there at the time because it was too big of a market, but I was able to produce. And just so happened a year later, they put me on TV. So I was able to do both things. So it worked out really well.
So for me, I'm trying to turn my camera on, but it's not working. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Uh-oh, you just popped up, so you hit a good button. There you go.
Sorry, it was being really slow. So for me, I want to first kind of put out there that I got a unique taste of living in another place throughout undergrad via internships. So my parents actually moved from Ohio to Chicago after my freshman year. When I was a first year student at Ohio University. And so every summer I actually got to do internships in Chicago. So that was kind of my first taste of living somewhere else. So if you do have the opportunity, if you have any friends or family who live in other places doing a summer internship, that's a really great way to kind of experience a new city. And then for me, I actually did a little bit of a plot twist my senior year and decided to stay at OU for 2 more years for grad school, where I got my master's in education. I wanted to work in higher education and stayed there for 2 more years. Hey, Dory and Lindsay. And in higher education, it's very common that you move around a lot and live in different states because typically there's one or two or a few of a type of job that you want to do in your specific functional area. So right out of grad school, I immediately just opened my search, looked everywhere, and that's what led me to Richmond, Virginia initially after grad school. So sometimes your industry can kind of lead you to look into moving out of state just because of the options that you want to explore and because there may be more opportunities for you to go somewhere else. And I think because my parents had moved and they were no longer in Ohio, that also made me feel like, it was a little bit easier to leave because I didn't really have that home base in Ohio anymore.
I have a similar story to Cindy where my post-graduation, so I was at OU, my bachelor's is in math, like integrated mathematics. So in education, I was going to be a high school math teacher, and I started to career explore in the state of Ohio. That's where I'm from. I'm from Cleveland. I wanted to stay here, teach here, but I quickly found out that the landscaping jobs for teachers in Ohio is really hard to come by, especially in schools that like I wanted to be in. So I decided to extend my 5th year at Ohio University with a teaching fellows program where I was teaching half days at a local high school. I was at Trimble High School in Gloucester, Ohio, and I was doing a master's in sports and recreational management through the College of Education. So after my 5th year and after that graduate school year, I decided to look into Teach for America. I knew it was an opportunity that I could take me literally to 51 regions across the United States. You don't have to have a bachelor's in education, but it is another way to get certified and teach. And decided to move to Houston, Texas with Teach for America. My whole family is in Ohio too, so I really didn't want to leave. But I knew that there was a lot more opportunity and actually teacher shortages all over the country that could use someone like myself rather than trying to put all my energy and effort into the state of Ohio. And my Teach for America is a 2-year program, but my 2 years turned into 7 years in Houston. Love Houston. If my family could have moved down there, I would have. Jennifer maybe could speak a little bit more, but the Houston area is literally booming with opportunities. I was able to grow professionally in so many ways, and opportunities just kept on rising. And then actually when I moved back to Cleveland this last summer, it was challenging again to get a job in the Ohio market. So I will say, Bobcats, do not be afraid to go out of state. There is a lot of opportunity, especially if you don't have family or kids, because that's the reason I came home, was just to bring my 2 little daughters home. But if I didn't have them, I'd still be in Houston.
I love it. I love that all of you all had some type of exposure prior to actually taking the dive yourself, just from your internship. Seemed like you all had internships that gave you exposure through your parents. So that's really great. So when you think about relocating, what factors played a role in you deciding to either move to the state that you're in or that you moved to, or just the idea in general? Because Lord knows I say I crash landed in Athens, and I did. At that point, I just needed a job, and I'm like, Athens? What? If it's not Cedar Point, Michigan people don't know what it is, right? Or Little Bow Wow is from Columbus. That's the only reason I knew what was happening there. So outside of like maybe the desperate move that I did to just get my first job out of college, what factors did you seriously take into this whole relocation idea?
I know for me, so just so everybody's clear, I'm probably a weirder case. I ended up moving to Cincinnati, getting a great job there, and then getting another great job in Cincinnati at 2 different stations there. And I worked there for about like, I don't know, 8, 9 years before I moved. So I've only been in Houston 2.5 years, and I wish I would have done it a lot sooner, as Miranda was saying. But I think the main thing you have to think about as factors is, does it make sense? And when I say that, I don't mean, when you're at home, obviously in your hometown, you think, oh, it makes sense to stay where I know everybody. But when I say makes sense, um, not that it's too good to be true, but it's something obvious that you feel like you need to do. So like for me, it was the opportunity. I was ready for change, career growth. I feel like I kind of hit the highest I could go. Ohio's a great place. So when people get jobs in communication, like Cindy was saying, Sydney, that they stay there. So it's sometimes hard to move up because they have their families and everything. So career growth, increase in salary. I like the warmer weather, so better climate. And I wanted to experience a bigger city. I wanted to see if I could handle a top 10 market. And so that's what I looked at when it came to factors in moving.
I think for me it was the industry specificness of what I was targeting to look for, and the opportunities that I felt I had a good chance to get. Much like everyone else is saying, you have to, leaving college, you're on this high, and it's the best time to take a chance on yourself or an opportunity versus, maybe waiting and second guessing yourself. You just graduated. There's nothing better than the 4 years you just dedicated to the time that you spent in Athens. And honestly, you don't know how to top it. You're at a weird point in your life. There's really, like, once you get that diploma, you don't know what you're supposed to do. So taking a courageous move to go to a new place, to take a chance, nothing is permanent. If you don't think it works for you, you go to another market or you go back home and you reevaluate. I think it's about having the confidence that you leave OU with and carrying that with you and tapping into the alumni chapters that are in a lot of the great cities to have a family away from your own personal family. I know that what I try to do as an alumni leader here is welcome everybody in, whether they're from the class of 62 or the class of 2018. I want them to come in and immediately have that common bond and that shared experience that we all had about our time at OU. And, you know, make sure that they're not entering a new city with a lack of confidence. And if they are, try to help them and try to encourage them and say, like, this is weird for everybody. Everybody goes through this growing pains. We all miss OU. Let's talk about that instead, and let's have some fun and really just give that Bobcat love that I feel like we as an alumni chapter are known for. And once somebody sees that warmth and welcomingness, then the guard gets let down. Maybe they stop worrying about things like that. And if you offer like suggestions on the city, where to live, where to go to eat, what to hang out with, like come to our events, things like that. That's my biggest calling card for what I try to do is just say, listen, this is where I've lived here for 12 years. And yeah, I left Ohio. It was hard, but you know, once this became my new home, I wanted to bring all those good memories and make them what my city has to offer. And I think it's the same for any of the other folks on the panel here. But it's to have that courage with yourself and ride that high that you're leaving graduation with, and just don't take a beat. Just take a chance and go hard for a year. And if it doesn't work, you reevaluate. Maybe, you know, you go back to grad school. Maybe, you know, you do something else. But if you can go hard out of OU and hit the world, it's gonna pay a reward to you for putting that effort in and having the courage and charisma, and be proud about what you accomplished and what you're about to accomplish.
Yes, exactly. And sorry, my video is really delayed, so you probably saw me pop up a few times and then go away, and it will do the same thing this time. I don't know why the video is so slow, but I really approached it similarly as a really exciting time. Like, you know, how often, you know, just like we were talking about earlier, once you start to have kids and you're married and stuff, it gets a little bit harder to make those decisions about where you're going to move and where you're going to go next. If you're graduating and it's just you and you don't have anybody else to worry about, the world is really your oyster. So for me, I was kind of like, where would I want to live? Like, what cities sound really cool and attractive to me? And, you know, I knew that I wanted to be in a bigger city. I didn't necessarily want to go as big as like New York, but I wanted something that was big, that had amenities. I love Athens, but I really needed a Target and a Chick-fil-A, and, you know, some places like that were on my list. Like, that sounds silly, but I was like, when I was job interviewing, I was like, so like, what restaurants and stores do you have nearby? Just because you do miss some of those things living in Athens. But so for me, when I first was leaving grad school, I had St. Louis was an option, Nashville was an option, Virginia, North Carolina. I really was kind of all over the place, and really just was thinking about, you know, what places seemed attractive to me. Did I want to live somewhere warmer? Did I want to live in a bigger city? So really just thinking about, you know, what's important to you in the place that you're living. The job is important, but also what are you hoping to gain in that city, in that community that you're going to be moving to? And just like Matt said, the Bobcat network is so strong, and it will be in the most random ways that you connect with other Bobcats. When I moved to Richmond, in my apartment building, I met a girl there who I think she might have been a Pepsi scholar with me, actually. And she lived in my apartment building, and I didn't know her very well other than the Pepsi Scholar program. Her name was Adrienne, and she just had an OU shirt on one day at our pool. And I was like, hey, I think we kind of know each other. And we both went to OU, and we became friends just meeting at my apartment. Super random. You know, we weren't really that close of friends before at OU, but you will meet people in the weirdest ways, and Bobcats are everywhere. Living in Richmond, we were about an hour and a half away from DC, and the DC alumni network is very strong. And even though I didn't live in DC, there was a Facebook group that I could join, and I still got access to any activities they were doing or anything that was going on, staying up to date that way. In Wilmington, we don't really have a network here that's that big, but still really easy to be connected now virtually via Zoom and things like that. So just because you're moving to a new place doesn't mean you're going to have to start it alone, or, not have friends right away, or not have those connections, because there are Bobcats everywhere. Chicago was a great example. Every day I would walk down the street and run into a Bobcat in Chicago, which is a very big city. But I feel like Chicago is almost like a second Athens. Like, there's so many Bobcats there. So just know that you won't be alone. There will be other people. You'll make those connections. And it's really exciting. And just like Matt said, if you go and you realize you hate it and you don't want to do that again, you can go back. It's okay. You can go try. You have a few years of, a grace period to go try something new and test it out. And maybe that's not going back to Ohio. Maybe it's even going to another state or another city. So you do have options. It's really exciting. And a lot of people are doing that. And, you might meet someone that you never even would have thought of. So it's an exciting time.
For me, there was a lot of factors that I was considering when relocating to Texas. And I had fallen in love with another Bobcat when I was spending my 5 years at OU. And he was on my mind too, who is now my husband. And he also was a teacher. So I had to consider, where could we both get a job so we could live together. And when I decided to join Teach for America and I learned about the education landscape in Houston, I realized that my husband could also, boyfriend at the time, could get a job there as well. And so I think in terms of, I know it can be easy to say, especially with when you're talking to alumni who have moved, maybe I had someone that I wanted to bring with me, but that meant I had to move to a city that could accommodate for two people coming into their workplace. I'll also say I wanted to also find a company or an organization that would help me with the move. Not necessarily all on a financial type of way, but I think a logistical way. Moving across the country is not an easy task to do. I didn't know how to navigate applying to different schools down there. Was I can my Ohio certification also be a Texas certification? So I was looking for an organization that would help me in the process in a professional way, and then also help me continue to grow while I was there. Very similarly to a lot of the other folks on this call, I think there was a really strong Ohio network in Texas as well. We went to a lot of the alumni association gatherings, which was really cool. And it was helpful to have someone like Matt, hey, you should go to this restaurant or go out to this bar, or go do this. It actually helped me make Houston my home there. But I think just in general, there was a lot to consider. I was also leaving my family, which was super hard for me, but I knew they would always be there. And when I got my grandmother's approval of you know what, you need to go and explore and do things on your own, I will be here for you. I'd rather you go out and explore it than be stuck here in Ohio. And I say stuck here in Ohio, it was their end all be all, but it wasn't. And then my last little tidbit here is I was doing a lot of work in rural Appalachia, Ohio, in the school systems, and that is great. And I think it was cool, but I really wanted to submerge myself with a diverse set of students and learn from their cultures and their experiences. And I knew I wasn't going to get that in Appalachia, Ohio. So I decided to move to Houston, Texas, where there is so much culture, so many different types of people, so many experiences that I grew not on just a professional level and not just personally from the moving experience, but I also think just from learning about other people and what they do has been really important to me. And that was also something I was considering when I was deciding with Teach for America, at least, how to do my preferences, because you do get to preference where you go. And I was like, I want to go anywhere. But then I got to some nitty gritty stuff.
Thank you all. I love that each one of you kind of hit a different perspective. I'm like Sydney, I have a list. My next destination, I definitely have a list. I need to be able to get my eyebrows arched and my nails done without driving 45 minutes to an hour. It's just very plain and simple, So in a mall has to be at least within 15 minutes, city miles. So look, I have that definite list too. And Miranda, I love that you talked about having to think about a partner and consider that, because I think a lot of our students do have to take that into consideration if they're in these Bobcat relationships. I do not have that story, so I don't know what that's like. But for those that do, I like that you were able to give that perspective. And then you touched on my next question. So, with that being said, how did you prepare to move? Like, was it expensive? Did you take a moving expense? I know I worked 3 jobs to get the money. I was hustling, like really hard, and then I took a moving expense. So, what was it like to just like prepare for moving, looking for a house, or looking for a place to live when you live in another state, and trying to learn the terrain, and do I take a car? Do I buy a car? Do I drive a U-Haul? Do I ship? So what was that whole moving process like, and what did you do to prepare to make that? Because we all didn't just wake up and take off.
Yeah, I can go. So I was really fortunate to have family support in this aspect. I was kind of crazy. I graduated with my master's on Friday, I think, and then that weekend drove from Ohio to Richmond to go apartment shopping. So my mom went with me. We made it a whole little weekend. I had about a month until I had to move there. And so we went for a weekend. We just explored different apartments and kind of got a feel for the city. And I'm not going to lie, even coming out of grad school and making a decent salary, a lot of apartments do require that you make a certain amount to be able to live there. And so my parents were very gracious to be a co-signer on my apartment with me and, help me in that transition of moving, because I had had roommates all throughout undergrad. I lived in a sorority house and I was ready to live on my own. So I wanted to live by myself, but I did need, that help. So my parents were helpful there, but it definitely helped getting to kind of go see the city and explore it for a weekend before actually moving there and going sight unseen. I know that's not always an option, but if you are able to do that, I definitely encourage it. And it can be fun just to make a little weekend out of it. And I was also very fortunate to have a supportive new supervisor that I was coming to work for. So before I moved there, I told her she knew I was new to Richmond, and she took the time to email me, here's some areas to live. Here's the differences between the areas. She knew I was a young professional, and, here are the areas that young professionals live. Here's the good restaurants to try. Here's how you get around. Richmond is a city, but the public transportation isn't quite established that well yet. So having a car was going to be important for me. I was working on a college campus, so I had to also make sure that I was living separate from student housing as a professional, just all things that I wouldn't know if I didn't have, that supervisor to kind of send me that information ahead of time and give me kind of a lay of the land, and then being able to go explore it as well. I did drive a U-Haul. My parents helped me. They said they would never help me move again after that. So luckily I'm now married and my husband got to do the next move with me to Wilmington. So my parents got out of that. But again, I couldn't have done it without my parents moving there. I lived on the second floor of an apartment building, and, they had to help me get everything there. But truthfully, I ended up just selling a bunch of stuff and kind of buying a lot of stuff new when I got there, because that was just easier, with this big new move. And yeah, I think taking the time to just do your research, get familiar with different neighborhoods. You can visit the place beforehand. If not, ask your supervisor. I know that it was something that my job worked really hard on, was kind of creating new guides for new people who are coming from out of state. Here's the neighborhoods, here's places to eat, here's those things. So don't be afraid to ask if they don't provide that information. But the internet also has, a lot of good resources as well for you to look up on your own. But it can be daunting, it can be challenging, but it can also be really fun. I love apartment shopping. Did the same thing with my move to Wilmington, made a whole weekend of it and looked at all the apartments. So it can be really fun. And then I think this was a question, so I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but my company also did pay or reimburse $500, not a whole bunch, but they did reimburse up to $500 for moving expenses, which pretty much covered the U-Haul. So that is something that you can ask about or even negotiate in your job offer is, what support do they have in helping you move and relocate. And I've even heard of examples where sometimes if you can't find a place right away, companies will even maybe set you up for a month or so in like short-term housing or a short-term apartment while you are searching. So definitely all good questions to ask, because companies want to make it a good transition for you. They want you to be successful. They don't want to, just leave you struggling on your own. So if the employer doesn't bring that up to you, go ahead and ask those questions in your interview process as well.
I can go next. So for me, it was, I really had to take money into consideration here. And I think I had a very similar experience as Sydney. As like I graduated with my master's, and within like 3 days or so I had to move to Houston, Texas, and I had never been there. I vividly, y'all, remember sitting on that plane and someone was just like making small talk, and he was like, have you ever been to Houston? Or where, or like he asked me where I was going, and I was like, no, I have never been. And he's like, what are you doing? Just business or visiting? And I said, I'm moving there. And I like instantly started crying, panic set in, anxiety galore. I was moving to a place I literally did not know a thing about. However, with Teach for America, they make you do like a summer training called Institute, which was at Rice University with them that particular year. So I was actually went back to dorm life 101 for about 6 to 7 weeks with Rice University, which was nice. They gave me food, shelter, transportation for like a buffer zone of 6 to 7 weeks. I had flew Southwest for those 2 like large suitcases because I fit everything I could into that, and I flew down there. But strategically, my boyfriend had drove a U-Haul down. So but we did sell a lot of stuff. We went to IKEA, stocked up. We were broke, recent college grads. We had no money. So we put together our money. I drove the Bobcat shuttle, or the cat cab from Transportation Services, saved up a ton of money that I could to, like, knowing that I was going to move to Houston. So we could at least put, I know Sydney talked about like rent. I know in Houston, they wanted my first month's payment and my last month's payment. That's a lot. So saved up money for that. And we did that. So I flew. Boyfriend, sorry, he had to make the 24-hour truck down to Houston, but like we had to do it in the most economic way that we could afford at that time. Moving back to Ohio, once we bought a house and 2 kids, was a whole different story. It's a whole different conversation, not for this panelist, but to at least get down there, that's what it took. It took a lot of planning, budgeting, saving some money, knowing what was going to lie ahead. But I think we also had a really unique cushion with Teach for America, the fact that I could stay in a dorm room for at least the first 6 to 7 months, or weeks, not months.
I'll give you kind of my interesting story. So I did not have a job lined up, and I did have a friend of mine that lived with me at OU. We went from Mill Iron to Nashville with a lot of blind faith and hope and excitement. And what we did to find a house, I don't remember exactly, but it was either Facebook or Craigslist. And the listing, there are many universities in Nashville. There's Vanderbilt, there's Belmont, there's MTSU. So the listing said 2 female students at Belmont looking for roommates. And I said, this is going to be perfect. We're going to move to Nashville. We're going to move in with 2 ladies. And this is how these romance movies on Hallmark get made. So it worked out okay. And we were month to month for a few months and had some good times and some good fun. No budding relationships came out of that aspiration. But I moved with very, very little because I was coming down without a job, and I said we're both going to roll the dice hard and see. I got a part-time job, and basically had an air mattress and a pillow top that I came to Nashville with, and a suitcase of clothes and a laptop. That was basically my OU Mill Iron apartment packed up into my car, and so. From there, things settled in, and I moved every year for about 6 years to different places in Nashville. And I think my parents gave up after the second move. They didn't help me come to Nashville, but they came and helped move me from place to place a couple times. It was a nice June ritual that we decided to have. So, and then I ended up getting a house with a couple other friends, one of which who I met at OU, who eventually graduated from Ohio State, but she came back to get a master's at Vanderbilt. And then I met my wife, who moved in with us, and 3 other people for a while. So that it did work out in the end. My plan, it just took longer than I thought. So, but it worked out well. So my preparation was pack it up, let's head south and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, we go back up north. And my roommate friend ended up getting his master's at Belmont. And yeah, we've both, I've been here since 2008, probably packed up a couple weeks after graduation in June and said, see ya, see me on cmt.com, hopefully, or hanging out at the CMA Awards with some famous folks. And took a few years before I got where I wanted to be, but it worked out. So that's my personality, though. I've been a ready to roll kind of person, and I feel like I've gotten better about it. But it was a fun entrance into a new city for sure, and it worked out. So
very cool. And I must, even though that wasn't my experience, I think I know like every Bobcat I know who moved to California moved the exact same way. They like
yep.
loaded up their car and went, and you're thinking, what are they doing with their life? And they survive and they're flourishing and they're like, it's so it can be done. But yeah, for me, because I moved later, and I was already established in my career, my company was able to give me two different options, which most companies will. They'll say, we will pay for your moving expense, we'll give you a lump sum of money, or we will put you up into a furnished apartment for like a month or whatever so you can find your place or wherever you want to live. So I was trying to think what strategically could help me save the most money. So I took that lump sum of money to move. I shipped my car. And when you ship your car, obviously you can load up stuff, more stuff in there. Got on a one-way flight, which was the scariest thing ever. I agree with Miranda. It was very traumatizing because I never had a one-way flight. And my mom had a childhood friend who lived in Houston who moved the exact same way. When she was a young adult in Cincinnati, she just wanted to live in Texas. And her mother had a friend in Texas and let her stay with her. And so that's what I did. She's a divorcee. Her son is an adult in another city. She has this big house in the suburbs. So I was a roommate and I was able to stay with her, as well as there was a couple from the church I grew up in that had been living there for 10 years who I was also able to stay with for about like a month or a month and a half. So I was able to save money and literally looked at like 20 apartments. I was very particular about where I wanted to live. I wanted to save money, have a nice spot. And luckily, Houston is one of those cities where, I mean, your money goes far here. For a big city, it matches Ohio cost of living. So I didn't want to spend too much money, but still live in a nice area. I had furniture that I liked, so I shipped it. But I had a traumatic experience with that because I had a crooked shipping company, and my parents flew out one weekend. On the weekend, my furniture's supposed to come. I have this new place. I'm so happy, and they're like, "What are you talking about? Your furniture's in Maine." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And it was a crooked company that had a very similar name to an established company, and I thought I was with the established company. So after calling the Better Business Bureau, every attorney you could think of, it eventually came. I was just really annoyed that my parents spent all this money coming to help me, but there was no furniture. But we still had fun times with it. So when you do move, you're going to run into hiccups, but don't let it get you down. Like it's a part of life. It'll happen. If you do have a company pay you a lump sum, make sure they tell you if it's pre-taxed or not, because sometimes I think people are confused with that. They say, "Oh, we'll give you 1,500," but then when you actually get it, it's 1,000 because they're like, "Oh, taxes." And I'm like, "Okay, I would have negotiated a lot differently had you told me that." I definitely, you just got to figure all these things out. It could be a part of your negotiations. Also, when I did move and I looked at apartments, I had my mom's friend come with me because she was able to ask questions that I didn't even think of. For example, when we're looking at apartments, I'm like, okay, cool, cool. And then my mom's friend is like, well, do you guys have pest control? And I'm like, okay, I guess that's an interesting question. Why would you ask about pest control? Well, in Texas, they have a lot more bugs than in Ohio. You get cockroaches, and it doesn't mean you live in a trifling spot. It's just, it's Texas, and cockroaches are everywhere. So you have to ask about pest control. So it was little things like that. Flooding. When I moved to Texas, I'm like, why do y'all act like it's a blizzard when it rains? Like, I just thought they just didn't understand what a thunderstorm was until I lost my car in a flood. It was a regular flood, and their sewage system is just horrible here in Houston. That's one negative. When it rains, the streets will flood. So if you're driving at night, you think you're driving on black pavement, and it's nothing but a lake. And so I got stuck in that, and I lost my car and had to have the police come rescue me. But we all survived. Yay. But those are just things that, so I encourage you all wherever you move, you're going to have people in Ohio who are like, oh, I know so and so, and I know so and so, and I know so and so. You need to reach out to so and so. And sometimes we might to think I want to do things on my own. I don't need to reach out to these strangers. But that was one of the best decisions I made, was reaching out to those strangers who became great friends, reaching out to different organizations. And I'm sorry, I think I'm answering other questions. But, just really take advantage of those people, fellow Bobcats and everything, because there's so much you just don't know about your new city that other people want to help you because other people were there in your shoes.
These stories are like giving me life. I feel like you all are like talking about some of the things I even experienced. So super crazy, but they're great. They're dropping real gems here if you're not picking up on it. And the moving expense, another thing you want to consider is, does that money come with stipulations? Meaning, us new people, if we don't like something, we quit. We like, I don't need this. I'm too grown for this. You don't pay me enough for this, right? And you quit, but then you took this moving expense and you're supposed to give 5 years of your life to pay off that money. So pay attention to the fine print and the tax thing. I got smacked hard with that. I was so sad. I was hurt. But but I love all these stories. Matt, I could never be you, but I had a friend that just packed up and moved to Florida this summer, and her job luckily let her stay remote. The only person working from a different state, she just left, like, bye, and they just liked her. So shout out to you all that's able to take that plunge. I'm a more organized person. I can't handle the anxiety, but we have different people of different walks. So hopefully if one of these people match up with who you are as a person, let their story show you that you can definitely make it. You just have to have determination. Really, that's really all that they're showing here. So my last question is, and some of you all kind of did it, but tell me about your first year, right? Describe your first year. How did you make friends? How did you deal with being away from your family? Matt, you said your family came down like every year, so you had that. But in the in between time, what was it like to be without your family or your childhood dog or your best friends, and just getting to know a new environment, maneuvering that, grocery shopping, right? I don't even think Lyfts and Ubers were around back then, but if you didn't have a car, and using public transportation for the first time, but just give a feel of what your adjustment was like, maybe something that you struggled with and how you overcame it.
I'll be quick since I'm long-winded, but having my friend come down with me made my transition really smooth, obviously. And Nashville's about 6 hours from Ohio. So for me, we did go back every once in a while. So it wasn't that far. It wasn't like I had to save money to get on a flight to go back. That was one of the reasons I love Nashville. But I mean, having interned in the same city that I moved to, I had a good understanding of things, the areas I liked, and I kind of just fell back into a previous place when I was here navigating as an intern. So that helped to kind of break that first year down. For me, it was just a small reset versus a big reset. But I immediately got a job and met people, and from there, just friendships spawned from that. And so I just tried to integrate myself into situations where I was around people that were local or had been locals, and ask a bunch of questions, and don't be afraid and explore. It's a new time. It's a new city. There's always stuff in Nashville and go do and see and check out. And there was no shortage of that. So I thrust myself into the situation. I just went out and said, oh, what do you want to do this weekend? So where do you want to go? Just point a direction and go exploring, and force myself to do it versus being stuck inside. There was no Microsoft Teams or Zoom calls. I mean, FaceTime. I think I had a BlackBerry, and it might have had a map on it, a map app. I don't know. Like when I interned, I had a stack of Google Maps that I printed off that was in my car that were like the go-to places, and till I figured out where I was going. But I think technology makes it easy to stay in one place versus go out there and explore the world that you're moving into. But it's also a great tool. So I just jumped in head first and figured it out.
So I have another unique Ohio Bobcat connection here as well. But when I moved to Houston, like I said, with my husband back then, we actually convinced my husband's brother, who was a Bobcat alumni as well. He studied chemical engineering, did the whole sales certificate at Ohio University, and his job was offering him to relocate to Ohio or to Houston, Texas. So he came with his wife, who was a Bobcat alumni in fashion retail merchandising. So, and we all made, like, we had been on Court Street together in the past. It was super fun, but they moved a year after we did. So we had some family after that first year come down, which was nice to have. But during that first year, we got involved in a lot of stuff. There was like some rec leagues that you could get involved in Houston. We got involved in like an adult dodgeball league at a bar, which was so much fun, but also got pretty crazy at times if you want to put alcohol, adults, and dodgeball together. I would not advise to do that, but maybe some like co-ed slow pitch softball, much better. But they had a lot of opportunities to get involved, just like outside of my coworkers and teaching, which a lot of teachers can get sucked into that little bubble. And we were like, let's branch out. I will say though, being with Teach for America, it's a unique way to network and have friends. So Houston is one of our larger corps size. We had over 180 new corps members who were fresh graduates, like, so brand new professionals all together, undergoing that, like I said, that summer training, which was at Rice University. So it was like it was like college 101 all over again, just as adults. So it was cool to network with them, make my friends, some of which I'm literally lifelong friends with now. And like having Teach for America. And again, that was part of like the reason why I decided to join that, knowing that I was going to join like-minded individuals who wanted to shape education the way I saw fit, as well as have a group of people that were in the same boat as me. You're just starting off as a professional. Your professional life versus what your life was like in undergrad is vastly different. You don't have that free time. You can't just walk up to Bronies and grab that afternoon happy hour or Thursday blue moon, whatever you want. It does get a little bit more stressful and strenuous. So finding people that are outside of your work was really key for us, just because I didn't want to always be associated with like my work people, because that's when you do move, that could be a really easy way to make friends. And I did find that out, but I also wanted like a group outside of my working environment. So I could have like a little bit of a separate life there, because I didn't want that to clash too much. So my advice would be, yeah, friends, but definitely try and branch out and find friends outside of your work bubble as well.
I know for me, when you move, it's going to be scary regardless. You're going to feel lonely, and that's something you just have to sit with. There are going to be times that you're going to just feel lonely. And it was okay because, like, you don't know anyone, you're new. I'm living in this house with my mom's friend, but I'm not going to go to the bar with her. So she was super nice, but we're not going to party together. But it's just you have to just realize like you just got to put yourself out there. Be okay going somewhere by yourself. And I love that because it forced me to go to all kind of like networking events, and every organization I was a part of in Cincinnati, I then joined in Houston, or I had people who could connect me to people that were in those organizations, whether it was volunteering, my sorority. I'm big in my church community. Like I wanted to find like a church body. So I found a group of people who liked similar things with that. I volunteered with people, and I just forced myself to meet folks. And when I did that, and then I connected with people that like relatives and friends told me about, like, oh, I have a former coworker who's around your age who lives in Houston now. You should hit her up. Here's her number. And I'd be like, okay. And then I had somebody to go grab drinks with or have dinner. And, it was really just great to always just drive around and get lost, like purposely get lost. And Houston's huge. So people who live like on Northwest, they're like, I'm not going all the way to Southwest. But me, I was like, oh, it's in Northwest. I'll go. That's super far. Like I was so excited to go to these far places because I never had been there before. And that was forcing me to learn. And my thing is, no matter what your job is, knowing your city is going to make you a better employee, because if you know your city, you'll understand the lifestyle. You understand why people get so excited the rodeo here and, stuff like that, which was a little bit of a culture shock, I must admit, even from Ohio. And just things of that nature. So that's why I wanted to force myself in there. So as far as now, I definitely feel like I have my crew of sorts. I have good friends in different areas of my life. I have a boyfriend here. I have my church home. I have my friend group. And one of my friends that I met when I first moved here, her family invited me to Ghana with them for New Year's. So I was able to go to an entirely different continent for New Year's, thanks to just putting myself out there and meeting people. So I just encourage you, don't fight the loneliness and fear factor. Use that to just make it even more exciting.
Yes, I totally echo everything you just said. The independent piece is super important, and you just have to kind of try it. So my best advice, and now it's a little bit nerdy, but I pretended like I was a tourist in my new city, and I looked on TripAdvisor, and I looked on Yelp, and I looked everywhere, like, what are the top things to do in Richmond? I didn't know anything about the city, and it kind of slipped my mind history, but Richmond used to be the capital of the Confederacy. And so there's a lot of history there. And so I really took the time to get to know. I went to museums. There was a trolley tour. There was a water tour. Like, I did every touristy thing you can imagine. My boss joked that I had done more in one summer than she had done in 5 years of living there, just because a lot of times, you move to a city and then you kind of like take for granted what's there. So when I first moved there, I was like, well, my excuse is I just moved here. So it's not nerdy, it's normal. And I just want to learn the city. And so I did all of those things, and I checked off all the boxes of, top 10 things to do in Richmond, and really got to know the city in different ways. And this is a very, unique story for me, but actually my closest friends that I met in Richmond, other than my work friends, I met online from a Facebook group. So when I was in college, I was a kind of brand ambassador for this newsletter called The Skim, if any of you are familiar with it. And when you were a ambassador for The Skim, you got added to the Skimbassadors Facebook group. And this Facebook group has like 9,000 people in it, so many people, but people from all over. And I had posted in there, hey, I'm moving to Richmond. Does anybody live here? Does anybody know the area? Any tips? And this girl, Carly, had posted, she was my same age. And she said, yeah, I'm from Richmond. I moved here a couple of years ago. And when she had moved there, she had done the same thing and met this other girl, Hayden. So I met up with them, and it was like a blind friend date of these girls that I met on Facebook, which like seems super odd, but I think in today's society with technology, like that's really cool. And to this day, they were invited to my wedding. I still talk to them even though I don't live there anymore. And so that was just really cool because they were both my same age. And it was, just like we were talking about earlier, it was nice to have friends outside of work. Work is going to be the number one place that you meet people just because that's where you go every day. But it was nice to be able to have some of that separation sometimes. So not being afraid to use online platforms and things like that. I met my husband on an online platform, and now I moved with him to Wilmington. And then when you have a significant other, I now have more friends, from his work and from his community as well. So that kind of comes with gaining a partner. But definitely just pretend you're a tourist in your new city and try all those new things. Don't be afraid to do things on your own. When I had first moved there, I was turning 25, and I had a 25 things to do before I turned 25 list of things I wanted to accomplish. And a lot of that was doing things on my own. And one of them was to take a dance class. I signed up for a 1-month dance class at a place called Rigsby Jig, but not a fun, not like hip hop, not that kind of dance class. I did a partner ballroom dance class because I was like, I want to learn this because it's fun and it's unique and nobody does it anymore. And it was me and a bunch of 80 and 90-year-olds. I'm not even kidding you. And I had to dance with them because you rotate partners throughout the class. And every week that I came back, they were so shocked and impressed that I came back because I was the youngest person there. But just little things like that. It was 1 month. I had bought it on Groupon. It wasn't very expensive. There was free outdoor yoga, anything that you can do that's, again, just getting to know the city, anything that's free and just putting yourself out there really helped make that first year just fun. And then inviting friends and family. When you do move to a new place, most of my friends stayed in Ohio. And so then you become the destination. 2 of my roommates from college that I lived with in undergrad actually just visited me this past weekend in Wilmington because I live on the beach now. So of course people want to come visit. So that's something else to consider is if everyone else stayed in Ohio and you moved, they're going to want to come visit you because you're in somewhere new and exciting. So I did have friends, come visit and help make that. But being independent, not being afraid to try new things and putting yourself out there and just being a tourist in your new city.
I love all of your advice and the things that you all tried. I feel like maybe I did a bad job at adjusting to Athens because let me tell you, I just like the movie theater and bronies. I'm very simple. Like $4 movie, dollar popcorn, bronies, play with the dog, right? You
Bagel
know,
Street
but
Cafe.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 I like the diner too, but they closed it. Like that was like very like that was a ritual for me, but they closed it. So I thank you all for the advice that you all gave, the tidbits and the knowledge that you all dropped. I think it was very helpful. So I hope students you took taking heed to the nuggets that they dropped because believe it or not, although I moved to Athens, a lot of the things that they said are some of the same things that I experienced in leaving my home state and relocating. And you just got to get out there and do it. You know, you never know what lies for you ahead. I found the best dog ever in Ohio. Like this dog cannot be replicated. She's a jewel, right? But I wouldn't have found her in Michigan. Now she's like the love of my little house, my life. So with that being said, does any students have any questions? I know that we had a couple on here. Although we are a couple minutes at time, I did want to give anybody an opportunity that maybe we didn't touch on the subject. Maybe you just have a question. Maybe you like one of their careers and just have a question. But I did want to open the floor up if you all had anything. There is no longer a Taco Bell, y'all. I'm so sorry. There is a Starbucks, a standalone Starbucks now. Like you can use your gift cards at the Starbucks. It's across from Buffalo Wild Wings.
I was just going to add, if you're worried about missing family and everything, that's why we have technology, FaceTime and calls. I still feel very close to my family. It's just I am not there in the physical. And obviously with the coronavirus, that's, put a lot on hold as far as traveling and everything. But just remember that and that you're going to grow when you move and just do it in your own timing. You don't have to compare it to other people. And one thing I did that may help people before you move is in your city that you're from, consider moving to another part of that city. So I grew up in the suburbs of Cincinnati. So when I moved downtown, it was almost like living in a different city because it was just a different way of life. So if that's one thing you want to try to do, maybe do that before you move. And then also, don't look down on living with your parents to save money before you do if you have the opportunity to do that. So I did that too. So.
I'm doing it in COVID, y'all. It's an adjustment, but I'm banking money on that gas bill. Gas bill is like $24. That's not normal. So definitely, if you have to do that, don't be ashamed, but definitely tuck your money away because you probably won't get another opportunity to do that. Because at some point, they probably will want an empty nest as much as they love you all. But definitely take advantage of that if you have that. So I'll give another 10 seconds of silence. Feel free to type a question that you have in the chat or come off mute and ask. All right, perfect. Oh, I see a bubble. Is that a question? Oh no, that was Sydney. Okay. I saw it light up. Um, I guess one question that I do have really quick, and I guess did any of you negotiate your start date? So some of you all said you left immediately, but did any of you try to negotiate to get a later start date for those that moved for a job?
Yes, I can talk about that. I negotiated for both. So I've now moved twice. My first job at when I moved to Richmond, I did negotiate the start date because I was graduating and they had offered me the job in May. And I had asked if I could start in June just so I could have that buffer. So I graduated like May 5th, I think, and then I didn't start until June 10th. So I did kind of negotiate to have a little bit of a month just to get settled, get to move in, not have to be worried about that. But I will say in my second job negotiation, when I moved to Wilmington, I had tried to negotiate the start date and they were very firm that I could not start later because they needed someone ASAP because they were down a person. And so in that case, I ended my last job in Richmond on a Thursday, moved to Wilmington that weekend, and started my next job on Monday because they were not able to let me start later. So that just kind of depends on, that company's position, what they're going through. In higher education, it's a little bit slower in the summer, so they were able to have that flexibility. But then at my job, in Wilmington at the convention center, they needed someone ASAP. So I've had one where they said yes and one where they said no. So it just kind of depends on, what their needs are as well. But definitely don't be afraid to ask that question and negotiate, because you don't have to be stressed and move that quickly if you don't have to. Some cases you have to, but in a lot of cases you don't have to. You just need to ask.
Perfect. Well, now we see we have a lot of things we can negotiate and ask. So hopefully students were taking notes of these questions that you should ask when talking about once you get the offer, questions that you should ask, and maybe some things you should probe during your interview. So definitely take these tidbits. I would like to thank all of our panelists that participated today for making my idea come true. This was so enlightening, and just felt good to hear that other people have really great stories for their time moving away. So I applaud you all for taking that plunge, and for being successful in what you do, and for sharing their knowledge and your experience with our students. So if you all like this, we will be doing this again in the spring, because I think it went pretty well. And if you all have any friends that you think will be down to do this, please feel free to email me their contact information, because I definitely want to get a bunch of different people back to share their experience, because I definitely see it as valuable. So round of applause for our panelists. Thank you once again for giving me an hour and 4 minutes of your time. I really appreciate it. And this recording will be available following the event, so spread the news to your friends. And you all have a wonderful Thursday. We're a day, one more day closer to the weekend. So have a safe weekend as we roll into the holiday, and enjoy your families.
Go Bobcats.
Always.
Yes. Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.
See ya.